Mom announced she's pregnant for the 7th time, but I'm done raising her minions. So I moved out, but she called the cops on me. When I tell people about my childhood, I always start with a good part, those first 6 years living with my grandparents. My parents were basically kids themselves when they had me. Mom was 19, Dad was 20. Real Einstein-level family planning right there. Since teenagers working minimum wage can't afford their own place, we crashed at my maternal grandparents' house, and those early years were legitimately the best time of my childhood. My grandpa, let's call him Gramps, was this old-school mechanic who taught me everything from changing oil to rewiring outlets. The man could fix anything with duct tape and determination. His workshop in the garage was basically my childhood paradise: organized tools, actual workbenches, and projects that made sense. My grandma, Nana, was Martha Stewart but with actual warmth. Her house was spotless, everything was homemade, and she never once made me feel like a burden. Her kitchen always smelled like something amazing was happening, with fresh cookies cooling on the counter. What really made those years special was how my grandparents treated me like I mattered. When I had a bad day at school, Nana would make hot chocolate and actually listen to what happened. When I was excited about something I learned, Gramps would put down whatever he was doing and give me his full attention. They showed up to every school event, remembered what I was interested in, and made me feel like being their grandson was something they were proud of. Meanwhile, my parents treated the place like a free hotel with room service. They'd roll in at 2 a.m. from whatever party they'd been at, sleep until noon, then complain about being stressed from adult responsibilities. My dad would sprawl on the couch playing video games while Gramps tried to teach him how to change a tire or fix a leaky faucet. "That's what AAA is for," my dad would say, never looking up from his controller. "What happens when you can't afford AAA?" Gramps would ask. "I'll figure it out when I get there." That was my dad's approach to everything: figure it out later, let someone else handle it, avoid responsibility until it became unavoidable. When I hit first grade, my parents announced they were ready for independence. They'd found this rundown rental house across town and were moving us out. The big reason for this sudden burst of maturity? Mom was pregnant again. I was actually excited. Finally gonna have a little brother or sister, and we'd have our own place. Man, if I could go back and slap some sense into my 6-year-old self, I would. The house was basically a downgrade in every possible way. No more Gramps' workshop where I learned to use tools. No more Nana's cooking. Just whatever frozen crap my parents could microwave. The place was this cramped 3-bedroom rental with thin walls, creaky floors, and a kitchen that barely fit 2 people. My parents acted like they'd upgraded to a mansion. "Look, we have our own place," my mom would say. When my brother was born, "I'm gonna call him Screamer because that kid had lungs like a fire truck siren," my parents started looking at me like I was their personal assistant. The progression was gradual but relentless. It started with little requests: "Hey, buddy, can you grab me a diaper while I finish this show? Keep your brother quiet, we're trying to have a conversation." I was 7 years old. 7. But apparently, that qualified me for childcare duties in their minds. Over the next 10 years, my parents decided to populate their own personal daycare center. 5 more kids joined our household, each one adding to the insanity. Let me introduce you to the cast of characters that turned my life into a survival horror game. Screamer, the firstborn edition, still lived up to his name at 9 years old. This kid could hit decibel levels that probably violated noise ordinances. He discovered that screaming got him attention fast, so that became his default communication method. The Destroyer, kid number 3, earned his nickname by breaking everything he touched. That gaming headset I saved up for? His masterpiece. Kid had hands like a demolition crew and the impulse control of a sugar-high toddler. He's 7 now. Spitter, kid number 4, was this little princess who made meals into Russian roulette. You never knew which plate had been contaminated. She'd take a bite of her sandwich, spit it back out onto the bread, and then offer it to someone else like she was being generous. She's 6. Tornado, kid number 5, could turn a clean room into a disaster zone in under 5 minutes. I swear this kid defied the laws of physics with how fast he could create chaos. He's 4. Velcro, kid number 6, was the clingy one who couldn't function unless attached to someone. Guess who that someone usually was? Spoiler alert, not our parents. He's 3. Hurricane, the baby, was fresh out of the oven and already living up to the family tradition of making everyone else's life harder. She's 2 now. Each new addition meant more responsibilities dumped on me. My parents' logic: "You're so good with kids." Translation: "We're too lazy to parent, so that's your job now." The transformation from helpful big brother to unpaid nanny didn't happen overnight. It was a masterclass in gradual boundary erosion that would make a cult leader proud. Looking back, I can see the calculated way my parents normalized the insanity. It started with seemingly reasonable requests when I was 8. Can you watch Screamer for 10 minutes while I shower? Became can you keep an eye on him while I run to the store? Which evolved into I'll be back in a couple hours, you know what to do. By the time I was 10, entire weekends disappeared into childcare duty. My parents would announce their plans like I was their employee getting a schedule, we're going to dinner Saturday night and then probably grabbing drinks with friends. Kids need to be in bed by 8. I remember one particularly infuriating Saturday when my friend Jake called to see if I wanted to go to the arcade. I had to tell him I couldn't because I was babysitting. Not helping out, not watching them for an hour, full-on babysitting 5 kids under 10. Why can't your parents watch their own kids? Jake asked with the innocence of someone from a functional family. Good question, Jake. Good fucking question. When I brought this up to my mom, her response was a masterpiece of gaslighting. Other kids would be grateful to be trusted with such important responsibilities. Maybe you should appreciate how much we believe in you. The guilt trips became an art form. Any resistance was met with accusations of selfishness, ingratitude, or not caring about the family. They'd weaponize my siblings' emotions against me. Velcro was crying all day because his big brother doesn't want to spend time with him. Meanwhile, my parents' idea of quality time with their own children was parking them in front of the TV while they scrolled through their phones. But somehow, I was the selfish one for wanting a social life. The impact on my education became increasingly severe as the years went on. Parent-teacher conferences became exercises in creative fiction as my parents explained away my declining performance. He's just not applying himself, became their standard line. Never mind that I was falling asleep in class because I'd been up until 2 a.m. with crying babies. Never mind that I couldn't complete homework because I was too busy helping 5 kids with theirs. I'll never forget the conversation with my 8th grade math teacher, Mr. Rodriguez. He pulled me aside after class one day because I'd failed another test. What's going on at home? He asked. You used to be one of my best students. I wanted to tell him everything. About the sleepless nights, the constant chaos, the way my parents had essentially checked out of parenting. But how do you explain that to an adult? Who would believe that parents would voluntarily turn their teenager into a third parent? Just having trouble focusing, I mumbled. Mr. Rodriguez looked concerned. If there's something affecting your ability to do schoolwork, we can talk to the guidance counselor about getting you some support. Support. Right. Like there was a support group for kids whose parents had outsourced their responsibilities. The missed opportunities started piling up. Science fair? Couldn't participate because it was the weekend and my parents had plans. School play auditions? Couldn't stay after school because someone had to pick up the kids. Academic decathlon team? The practices conflicted with my unofficial shift as head of household. Each missed opportunity felt like a door closing on my future. While other kids were building college-worthy resumes, I was building experience as an unpaid domestic worker. The social consequences were devastating. Having friends became nearly impossible when you're essentially a single parent to 5 kids. Spontaneous plans? Forget it. Weekend hangouts? Only if my parents didn't have plans, which they increasingly did. I watched my social circle shrink as friends stopped inviting me places. Who wants to hang out with someone who's always canceling last minute because of family obligations? The few friends who stuck around started treating me like I was some kind of tragic figure. Dude, why don't you just tell your parents no? My friend Marcus asked after I had to bail on his birthday party. Easy for him to say. Marcus's biggest responsibility was taking out the trash once a week. He had no concept of what it was like to have 6 people depending on you for basic survival while 2 adults played house. The isolation was particularly brutal during my sophomore year. There was this girl, Sarah, who I'd been talking to for weeks. She was smart, funny, and actually seemed interested in me. We'd made plans to go see a movie together, my first almost date ever. 2 hours before I was supposed to pick her up, my parents announced they were going to a friend's wedding reception. It's last minute, but Jenny had a couple cancel. We can finally go out for once. But I have plans, I said, desperately hoping they'd remember that I was a human being with my own life. Plans change. Family comes first, my dad said, not even looking up from his phone. I had to call Sarah and cancel. The embarrassment was crushing. How do you explain to a girl you like that you can't go out because you have to babysit your siblings? It sounds like the lamest excuse ever, even when it's true. Sarah was understanding about it, but things were never the same between us after that. She started talking to Derek Martinez, who had the luxury of being available when she wanted to hang out. Derek's biggest worry was whether his parents would let him borrow the car, not whether he'd be stuck changing diapers all weekend. What made the situation even more infuriating was how our extended family not only normalized but actively encouraged the dysfunction. Family gatherings became showcases for how responsible and mature I was compared to other kids my age. Look how good he is with all the little ones, my Aunt Karen would gush to anyone who'd listen. You're so lucky to have such a helpful oldest child. Lucky? Right. Uncle Mike, Karen's husband, would pat my dad on the back like he'd accomplished something impressive. You really raised him right? Kids these days don't know what responsibility looks like. The irony was lost on everyone except me and eventually Paul, my mom's nephew who was close enough in age to see through the bullshit. Paul was about 7 years older than me, and unlike the rest of the family, he'd actually paid attention to what was happening. During one particularly chaotic Christmas gathering, Paul watched me wrangle all 6 kids while my parents socialized with drinks in hand. He pulled me aside later. "This isn't normal, you know," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're doing all the work while they act like guests at their own kid's party. When's the last time you got to just be a kid at a family gathering?" I couldn't remember. At every family event, I was automatically assigned to kid duty while my parents enjoyed themselves. It had become so normalized that I'd stopped questioning it. Paul started paying closer attention after that conversation. He'd notice when I disappeared during family gatherings to change diapers or break up fights. He'd see me fall asleep on the couch because I'd been up all night with whoever was going through a sleep regression phase. Most importantly, he started calling it out. "Where are their parents?" He'd ask loudly when chaos erupted, and I automatically moved to handle it. "He's got it under control," my mom would say dismissively. "That's not the point. They're not his kids." The family would get uncomfortable when Paul pointed out the obvious. It disrupted their carefully constructed narrative that this was just normal family dynamics. There were several moments over the years when I almost snapped completely. Times when the weight of responsibilities I never asked for became too much to bear. One of the worst was during my junior year when Hurricane was about 8 months old. I'd been up for 2 straight nights because she had some kind of stomach bug and wouldn't stop crying. I was beyond exhausted, running on maybe 6 hours of sleep total across those 2 days. I had a huge chemistry test that Friday, one that could seriously impact my grade in a class I needed for college prerequisites. I'd been studying for weeks, but the sleep deprivation was making it impossible to concentrate. Thursday night, Hurricane was having another meltdown. Nothing worked. I tried feeding her, changing her, rocking her, walking around the house. My parents' bedroom door was closed, and I could hear the TV playing. They were awake, they just weren't helping. At around 1 a.m., I finally broke down. I sat on the floor of my room, holding this screaming baby, and just started crying myself. I was 17 years old, and I felt like my life was disappearing into this black hole of other people's responsibilities. That's when my dad appeared in the doorway, looking annoyed. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "I have a test tomorrow, and I haven't slept in 3 days." "Welcome to parenthood," he said with a smirk. "This is good practice for when you have kids of your own." Practice. Like I'd volunteered for this internship in parenting. "She's not my kid," I said. His face darkened. "She's your sister. Family takes care of family." "Then why aren't you taking care of her?" "I work all day. I need my sleep. I go to school all day and have homework and a job. When do I get to sleep?" "You'll figure it out. You always do." And there it was. The fundamental problem with my family's logic. Because I'd been forced to figure it out so many times, they assumed I always would. My competence had become a prison. I failed that chemistry test. Not just failed, bombed it completely. The sleep deprivation made it impossible to remember anything I'd studied. When I tried to explain to my teacher what had happened, it sounded like I was making excuses. "Family responsibilities are important," Mrs. Chen said sympathetically, "but you need to find a balance. Maybe you could ask your parents for help managing your time better." Ask my parents for help. If only it were that simple. By senior year, the impact on my future was becoming undeniable. My GPA had dropped to a 2.8, and my SAT scores reflected months of test prep interrupted by childcare emergencies. The guidance counselor called me in for a meeting about college applications. "Your grades don't really match your potential," Mrs. Patterson said, looking at my transcript. "What happened between sophomore and junior year? How do you explain that your grades tanked because you became a night shift nurse for an infant? That your study time disappeared because you were helping 5 kids with their homework every night while your parents watched Netflix?" "Just had some family stuff going on," I said. "Well, with these grades, your college options are limited. Community college might be a good place to start and transfer later." Community college. I'd once dreamed of going to a 4-year university, maybe studying engineering like Gramps had always encouraged. Now I was looking at starting over at community college because I'd spent my high school years raising children that weren't mine. The cruel irony was that my parents were actually proud of my maturity and responsibility. They'd brag to other parents about how independent and capable I was, never acknowledging that they'd stolen my adolescence to create that maturity. "He's going to make such a great father someday," my mom would tell people. "He's had so much practice." Practice I never asked for. A childhood I never got to have. The moment I truly understood how fucked up my situation was came during a conversation with my friend Tyler's dad. Tyler and I were working on a group project at his house, and I mentioned I needed to leave early to pick up my siblings from school. "Don't your parents usually handle that?" Mr. Johnson asked. "They're at work," I said automatically. "What time do they get home?" "Around 6, usually." Mr. Johnson looked confused. "So you're responsible for after-school care for 6 kids, every day?" When he put it like that, it sounded insane even to me. "I guess, yeah. Wow. That's a lot of responsibility for a teenager." Tyler looked embarrassed for me. "Dad, it's just how their family works." But Mr. Johnson wasn't letting it go. "How do you manage homework and sports and everything else teenagers do?" "I don't really do sports," I admitted. "What about college prep? SAT tutoring? Extracurriculars?" Each question felt like a spotlight on everything I was missing. Normal teenage experiences that other kids took for granted were impossible luxuries in my world. That night, I went home and really looked at my life. I was 18 years old and had never been to a school dance, never played a sport, never joined a club, never had a real girlfriend, never gone to a friend's house just to hang out without worrying about getting home for kid duty. I'd been so busy being the third parent that I'd forgotten to be a kid. The 7th pregnancy announcement didn't come out of nowhere. There had been signs that my parents were gearing up for another round of baby making. Hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. My mom suddenly being more interested in my plans for after graduation. "You'll probably want to stick around for a year or 2 before college," she'd say casually. "Help us get settled into a new routine." New routine. Code for "we need you to raise this baby too." When they finally made the announcement during that family meeting, the looks on my siblings' faces said everything. Even they understood that another baby meant more chaos, more noise, more competition for attention that was already spread too thin. But what really sealed my decision to leave was the conversation I overheard later that night. My parents thought I was asleep, but their voices carried through the thin walls. "Think he'll be okay with it?" my dad asked. "He doesn't really have a choice," my mom replied. "Where's he gonna go? He can't afford his own place." Good point. And honestly, he's better with babies than we are at this point. They were planning my life like I was their employee, not their son. Banking on my inability to leave, confident that I'd just accept this new burden like I'd accepted all the others. That's when I knew I had to go. By the time I was 16, my parents made a decision that still makes my blood pressure spike. When Hurricane was born, instead of putting the crib in their room like normal humans, they stuck it in mine. Their justification: "You're so good with babies, and we really need our sleep for work." So at 16, I became a single dad to my infant sister. 2 a.m. feedings, diaper changes, dealing with colic, walking the floor for hours trying to get her back to sleep, all while trying to maintain decent grades and not look like an extra from The Walking Dead at school. The setup in my room was basically a nursery that happened to have my bed in it. Crib against one wall, changing table where my desk used to be, bottles and baby supplies covering every surface. My computer got moved to a corner where I could barely use it, and forget about having any privacy. The sleep deprivation was brutal. My grades started tanking. How could they not? I went from being a solid B+ student to barely maintaining a C average. When my guidance counselor called home about my dropping GPA, my mom's response was classic. "Oh, he's just going through a rebellious phase. You know how teenagers can be. He stays up too late playing video games probably." Video games. Right. Because I had so much free time. Last month, my parents decided to drop their atomic bomb during a family meeting. "We have exciting news," my mom announced like she was revealing winning lottery numbers. I knew. I just knew what was coming. "We're having another baby. Number 8. The room started spinning. They weren't even telling me as their son. The way my dad phrased it made everything crystal clear: "We're gonna need extra help when the baby comes. Good thing you're 18 now, so you can take on more responsibility without any legal issues." Legal issues. They'd actually thought about the legal implications of their child labor operation. That's when something inside me just snapped. I was done. Completely, utterly done. I excused myself, went to my room, and called Gramps. "Grandpa, they made another mistake. I need help. Can I please come live with you?" The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds before he exploded, not at me, at the situation. "Those idiots are having another kid? Jesus Christ. What's wrong with them?" I'd never heard Gramps swear before. That's when I knew he was as fed up with my parents as I was. Pack your essentials. We're coming to get you right now. Gramps and Nana showed up within 30 minutes, and I was out of there. I'd never seen my grandparents look so angry. The look on my parents' faces when they realized I was leaving was pure shock. Not sad that their son was moving out, they were already panicking about who was going to handle their responsibilities. "You can't just leave," my mom shouted, like I was breaking some kind of contract. "Watch me," I said, walking past her with my duffel bag. "We're your parents," my dad added, like that meant something coming from people who treated me like hired help for years. "No," I said, stopping at the door. "You're the people who gave birth to me. There's a difference." As we drove away, I could see my parents standing in the doorway with the kids' chaos erupting behind them, finally getting a taste of what their lives looked like without their unpaid babysitter. Within hours of my escape, my phone turned into a notification nightmare. Angry texts, missed calls, voicemails ranging from furious to manipulative to downright pathetic. First came the anger. "How dare you abandon your family like this? Get your ass home right now." When that didn't work, they switched to guilt. "Your siblings are asking where you are. Velcro hasn't stopped crying since you left." Then came the manipulation. "We've always been there for you. Family sticks together through thick and thin." But the text that really showed their true colors came from my dad at 2 a.m. "Do you have any idea how much babysitters cost? You can't just leave us hanging like this." There it was. Their real concern wasn't losing their son, it was losing their free childcare. They actually called the police twice. Both times, the responding officers took one look at the situation and basically told my parents to get a life. "Ma'am, he's 18 and a high school senior," the first officer explained. "Unless you have evidence of kidnapping or coercion, there's nothing we can do." Here's where things got really interesting. Turns out Gramps and Nana had been documenting more than I realized. Every concerning conversation, every time I'd shown up exhausted, every joke I'd made about being the third parent, they'd been keeping track. When they called CPS, they had documentation going back months. The social worker assigned to the case found exactly what you'd expect: chaos. When she interviewed my siblings separately, the truth came out fast. Kids are terrible liars. Who usually dealt with a baby at night? Me. Who helped with homework? Me. Who got them ready for school when mom and dad were too tired? Take a wild guess. Screamer, bless his chaotic little heart, was particularly honest. He does everything. Mom and dad watch TV mostly. The CPS investigation wrapped up after 3 weeks. The official finding: inappropriate delegation of parental responsibilities to a minor child, resulting in educational impact and emotional stress. The consequences were beautiful. Mandatory parenting classes, required childcare education, 6 months of supervised visits from a family caseworker, professional childcare requirement for date nights, written acknowledgement of my rights. The real consequences hit them where it hurt most: their wallets and their reputation. Professional childcare for 5 kids during their weekly date night? That's easily $100 to $150 per night. As for me? I'm absolutely thriving. My grades bounced back immediately once I started getting full nights of sleep. I went from a 2.8 GPA to pulling 3.6 by the end of senior year. I got accepted to that engineering program I'd missed the previous summer. My college applications are looking solid, and I've even got a part-time job at Gramps' buddy's auto shop, real work that pays actual money. Revolutionary concept. The relationship with my parents is permanently damaged, but honestly, I'm good with that. Some of my siblings started asking questions about why I left. Screamer asked Mom why I had to take care of Hurricane at night when that was parent stuff. My mom's response: families have to help each other. But Screamer, not satisfied with vague answers, shot back: "But why didn't you help him with his homework like he helped us?" Out of the mouths of babes. The best part? My parents are finally learning what it actually takes to raise 7 kids. During one family gathering, when someone asked about the babysitting costs, my cousin Paul's response was perfect: "Welcome to what actual parenting costs." Most people figure that out before having 7 kids. Looking back, I realize this story isn't just about escaping a toxic family situation, it's about recognizing when you're being exploited and having the courage to stand up for yourself, even when the people doing the exploiting are supposed to love and protect you. My parents turned parentification into an art form, gradually increasing my responsibilities until I was essentially a third parent in the household. They justified it as building character and family responsibility, but the reality was that they were too lazy and selfish to raise their own children. The most important lesson I learned is that family isn't about blood, it's about how people treat you. My grandparents showed me what real family looks like: support, encouragement, and unconditional love that doesn't come with strings attached. They invested in my future instead of exploiting my present. Now, As I prepare for college and my actual adult life, I'm grateful for the experience in a weird way. It taught me responsibility, sure, but more importantly, it taught me my own worth. I learned that I deserve to be treated with respect, that my education and future matter, and that I don't owe anyone my life just because they gave birth to me. My story has a happy ending because I had advocates in my grandparents and cousin Paul. Not everyone in similar situations is so lucky. If you're reading this and recognize yourself in my story, know that what's happening to you isn't normal, it's not your fault, and you deserve better. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you, even if they share your DNA. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. And sometimes, just sometimes, standing up for yourself inspires others to examine their own situations and make changes too. My siblings are still young, but I hope that as they grow up, they'll remember that their big brother fought for the right to have his own life. Maybe they'll learn from my example that they don't have to sacrifice their futures for their parents' convenience. As for my parents, they're finally learning what actual parenting looks like, and it's expensive, exhausting, and thankless work. Who would have thought? The irony isn't lost on me that they spent years telling me I needed to be more grateful for what they provided, when the reality was that I was the one providing for them, unpaid labor, free childcare, and a convenient scapegoat for their own failures as parents. But that chapter of my life is closed now. I'm writing a new one, and this time, I'm the author.